Hey everyone, we're back for another session, and today we're going to be talking about forgiveness. So, as human beings, I'm sure we can all reflect on times where maybe we've done something that hasn't had a great outcome, or somebody or something has maybe done something to us and it causes us discomfort or pain or confusion. And so today we're just going to explore whether or not can we truly forgive what people have done. I'm Andrea Gullick.
And I'm Barb Gibson, and we are here to let her be heard.
So this topic, Barb, really does follow on quite beautifully, actually, from last week where we talked about if trust was broken, can we repair that with open communication? And trust and forgiveness and things like that, they really do go hand in hand, don't they? And it's that I want to say tentacles out and tentacles in. We know what that means because we've been experiencing that in a course that we're doing together. But it's really about these emotions that we feel, recognizing where our opportunity lies in that internally, what are our choices for us, opposed to externally what's happening to us, and where the line is for that in terms of being able to empower ourselves in situations that we don't really have any control over. So even just to start with, Barb, what would your definition of forgiveness be? Or do you even believe in it? Like, where do you come at with the whole when someone's maybe hurt us and forgiveness?
Yeah, I do. We just laughed about this just before we started. We jump on like 10 minutes before we start, and we start talking, and we're like, we should hit record 10 minutes earlier because we're just having this conversation. So we were talking about forgiveness. And to me, Andrea, forgiveness is something it's a gift you give yourself. Because if someone has wronged you in some way, real or perceived, if you don't give up the right to be angry or whatever the emotion you have that is so strong, it's stealing your joy. If you don't give that up, man, you're giving away all your power and I call it giving away space in your mind and your peace, and it's robbing you. So forgiveness is something I say give to yourself so you can get your peace back, but it's not forgetting. If someone has wronged you, there are consequences, especially in moral issues versus like, oh, you just made me feel like this. There's things that actually happen to us that that are wrong. It's not okay to do certain things without there being consequences to it.
Yeah.
So we don't forget what's happened. That doesn't mean that at all, to forget it and just let it be. Like, no, there's consequences. But forgiveness itself, to me, is a gift you give yourself so you can get your peace back.
And it's clearly resonating with people that are already tuning in, because we've got someone saying that forgiveness is a gift you give yourself. Absolutely, because it's such a powerful way to look at ourselves and our life, isn't it? Because that really is where the power lies of how do you want to feel during your days. So if essentially the anger or the resentment or the frustration, you feel like that's serving you, that's fine, because we get a choice, right? It's right. To the point where you recognize, is this serving me? Because it's a bit like the live I did a couple of days ago about the darkness out at sea. Like, I really do think that there are gifts in the darkness. There can be some little gifts or some little knowings or uncovering when we do feel a bit angry about something. But it's the choice of how long we stay there. It's the choice of how, and that gift of, okay, and maybe the gift is recognizing that I'm choosing not to have as much interaction there, or I'm choosing to not do that same thing again. Like it really is a learning moment, I think. But the forgiveness, go, Bob. Yeah, go.
Yeah, I was going to say, Andrea, it can be a learning moment in many ways. Like without giving a lot of detail, because I'm still kind of in the middle of this some, but someone really wronged me, and to a point that there's legal consequences that even kind of are out of my control that are happening to this person. And there were some other people involved too, and the other people were very adamant that, you know, this person was no good, and, you know, all this anger that was so bad. And I didn't feel that anger. Was I upset? Am I upset about what happened and what they did? Absolutely. And it wasn't right. But I didn't feel this anger. And if anything, I felt compassion for this person, that why would this person do this? That something must have happened in their life to make them think like this, to even do this. And I had such compassion, and in a way, it wasn't acceptable by the rest of the people involved, because how can you have compassion? But when I step back, and we hear me talk about the voice of love here, and I just sat. Actually, I was laying down, and I heard the voice of love say, "My compassion is who I really am." And so that helped me. You know, the other people are still resisting me, and that I have compassion. Believe me, I think this person should be in jail like they are. I think there should be consequences, all that, but I still had compassion, and I wasn't so angry, and I had peace. And every time we talk, these people are still so angry. And I'm like, how is that serving you? How? That's just taking your peace from you. That's robbing you of your own joy. And so the gift for me was that I got to see I am who I think I am. And I wouldn't have wanted to have that confirmed through what I experienced, but it is how it went for me. So, you know, we were talking about that just before we started, that do we walk our talk? We do this show every week, and we talk about a lot of things, and people might wonder, do you walk your talk? Like, we have what kind of experience?
Do you live in this bubble of peace all the time, really? Is that true? Like, there wouldn't be those wonderings, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And it's true. And to come back to it quickly if we lose it is the key. How can we? Because it's not that you never lose it. Things happen all the time. But how quickly can you come back to it? How quickly can you not let things affect you in such a powerful way that you lose your peace? So,
and it's that, isn't it, Barb, in terms of when I sit and I listen to your story and I think about this in terms of the practical life experience of forgiveness, and that it is a gift we give ourselves.
mm-hmm.
Because when we think about it, the energy and the discomfort and the pain that we feel internally with resentment or frustration or anger, that in no way really impacts anybody but ourselves. It may direct our actions, so it may have a flow-on effect of impacting other people. But when you lay down at night and you're marinating in what's happened and why, and that shouldn't have happened, and that was bad, and I can't believe that, there's nobody else but you with yourself that's being impacted by that. And so the gift of forgiveness is releasing us from our own infliction of continued cycled pain. And is it easy? No. In all honesty, for me, not all the time. No, it's not. But when we can recognize that, and that forgetting, like, I really want to focus on that forgetting. To not forget is to not forget the situation that occurred and make conscious choices around what feels good or not good. But there is power in in forgetting the pain, if that makes sense. Like when we say, if someone's like, well, if you're saying to forgive but don't to forget, isn't that the same thing? And it's truly not.
No.
Do you want to keep going with that? I think you might be able to express that in a different way.
I don't know, but it's not the same. It's very different. And sometimes that's why people don't want to forgive, because they think that means that they're saying it's okay.
Yes.
It's not okay. It's not. It doesn't have to be like that. But that's why they're very different. And so often when we talk to people, we catch that they don't see the difference in it. But if you think about it, it's very different. We're not saying forget and that it was okay and they're like off the hook. Like this person I'm talking about, they're not off the hook. Oh no, there's some big consequences. But I don't go to sleep angry and all that. And another thing you said, Andrea, about how it flows, how it only affects you, and then you kind of made reference to it can affect other areas of your life. And I believe that it really does, because if you're mad about something your spouse said, or well, let's just use that an example. Do you think your kids don't feel that? You're walking around the house, slamming doors, putting the pot down, so he's getting the message because you want him to know you're mad, you're angry.
I'm not laughing because that happens in my life either. I can just imagine it. Yeah.
I'm sure we can all relate to it some way, but think about that. That is going on. People are being affected, and the kids are going like, what the heck did I do? They're like, back off, go to my room, mom's upset or whatever, and so just look at your life. If you're struggling with forgiving someone, I would really encourage you to look at the rest of your life and what other relationship is that affecting? It's robbing your peace, but it's affecting other areas of your life. It could be affecting your peace, your physical health. We've all seen that someone's like, hey, they're kind of grumpy all the time. And then you look and they got a lot of physical stuff going on too. Is it a possibility it could be related? Doesn't mean it has to be, but could it be? So I'm just asking people to maybe consider, our listener here asking this question, like, consider what is the cost of not forgiving?
Yes.
Yeah.
And there's definitely those aspects of, we've talked about it in terms of words, and that we each have our own definition. And that's why I really wanted to explore, like, what does forgiveness mean to you, Barb, and what does forgiveness mean to me? Because we can hear words a lot, and we have this, like, maybe even sometimes like programmed belief of what forgiveness is.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Like,
I'd love to hear from our listeners. What do they think forgiveness is? Type that in.
Yeah. And so it's that the couple of things that really are awesome. Thanks, Jill. Love that Jill's here. Great insight. I've never made that connection. Anger and a partner just needs forgiveness. Awesome. And like, really want to respond to that forgiveness, I feel like, can often be looked at that the forgiveness is for the other person. And I really, really want to, from my heart, be clear on what that means for me, is that forgiveness is the gift for ourselves. And then that has a ripple effect out. But the most important thing is to be able to sit with our heart and work out how we want to feel in our life, regardless of what's happened out there. And I know that can sound really simple, like we've said so many times before, Barb. Like when you're talking about a friend that maybe stood you up, or a partner that hasn't kept his word. But what about when we head into really big territory? Like, can we still forgive? Like, you've disclosed a little bit. Sounds like it was a big thing and isn't easy for people to wrap their head around forgiveness. For me, the biggest thing in my life, I guess, was that there was someone that made an error in judgment that my husband is no longer alive because of. So yes, it was an accident, but it was still someone's action or lack of action that created that situation.
Mhm.
It, for me, was never going to serve me nor my children to hold on to any type of anger or resentment about that situation. For me, it was never going to bring him back. It was never going to ease my suffering nor my children. It was only ever going to add to it. Do I wish that in a split second he could have recognized what was going on and 1 second would have avoided massive amounts of trauma and pain? Absolutely.
Mhm.
But the other thing, Barb, and I wonder, like, where, I'd love your reflection on this, is that forgiveness also sometimes can be that struggle of resisting what is. Like, it's the struggle of, like, in terms of this topic and reflecting on conversations I've just had, there's people that can't forgive what people have done in the past. And it's almost this resistance of, you can't undo how you were treated.
Yeah.
And holding on to the anger and resentment and wanting for things to be different. It's not saying that's okay. It's not saying that. And it's not saying you get full access to me.
Right.
It's not saying those things. It's saying I love me enough to not impact my life on something I can't change. And I'm in control of, I get to say, the consequences kind of thing, isn't it? Like, what's the consequence of someone's actions that hurt you?
And I think you did bring up a good point there when you started, Andrea, about what the acceptance of what is. Like, if this is how this person is, can you just accept that? Or is the resistance, it's a little bit different, but it's kind of the same, of holding on to it, and the resistance of accepting it can keep you in a bad place. Another one, Andrea, is what about forgiving yourself?
Yeah.
How many of us hold on to things and we're like, oh, I shouldn't have done that, or
That's
we
such a good point.
was just the other day about divorce, and
Mm.
really being tough on themselves because they've been divorced, and so can they forgive themselves for the consequences that their kids are experiencing because of that, and harboring this resentment towards yourself, unforgiveness towards yourself is really big. I listen to this song all the time, and it's one is you're not your mistakes. So when you don't forgive, you're coming back to your own identity, that you're a terrible person. And is that true? Is that true? You're a terrible person. Or for whatever you did, or did you just make a mistake? Or is it just the way it is and the acceptance of how it is? Divorce just happens. It's not, there's something you agree to split. You agree this is the best way for both of us. There's fallout. Can you let that go? But I think it's huge how much we beat ourselves up over things. So the song was "You're Not Your Mistakes," and then another song says, "There are no mistakes, only chances you've taken." And I love that phrase, because I do stuff and it doesn't turn out, and do I go, "Oh, I'm so stupid. How could I have even thought that was a good idea?" How do you know if you don't try? How do you, and we're talking different levels of things that can happen. I know that, different shades of it, but I think a big one is how we hold on to things with ourselves. And even if we're mad at somebody else, are we also mad at ourselves because we even got in that situation? Like,
That
I
is such a
know
good
they're always
point.
like this. I know that always happens, and I go there again, and that can be very subconscious.
Mm.
Theory. And so sometimes, are we mad at ourselves so much that we're taking it out on somebody else and go, "You're the problem. You made this happen," versus that thing of like, "Oh, I participated in this too. I stepped into it too, but it has nothing to do with my identity. I want that. I'll also talk about that message till the end. All this stuff has nothing to do with your own identity, your own value, your own worth, your own enoughness.
And that's the thing, isn't it? Like, I love that, Barb, in terms of, like, can we get to that point? Or can people get to that point of recognizing that? And I've always believed this, and I'm quite okay if people just think I'm a quack. That's cool too. I've totally always believed that, like, our life is already really planned out. And what happens if what has happened was always going to happen, like those sliding door moments? Like, what happens if this is just the experiences that we were given for our growth and our inner journey? And and I know that can be a little way off for some people maybe, and that's totally fine, but what happens if there's nothing really that you can do now, and there isn't anything really you can do now that could change the course of where you've been? What happens if they were sent to us for our highest good?
And I love the way you posed it, Andrea, because hopefully no one thinks you're a quack for that, because all we're doing is just asking people to consider, just consider, what if you just thought about that for a little bit instead of resisting that statement? What if?
And the other thing is that has been really helpful for me on the journey with really, like, challenging things that may have brought me, like, confusion, or what are the gifts? What are the other gifts? So if we move past the forgiveness thing, which is really important, I know, but there will always be gifts that come from the discomfort of things not being how we would like them to be.
Yes.
I can tell you without a doubt, I would not be here doing what I'm doing without the situations that I've incurred along the way. Where can we see how the things that felt really uncomfortable and really stretched us, how have they changed us? How have we grown? What do we know? Like, how have we grown externally, but how have we grown inwardly? I know myself more intimately than I ever have before, based on some of the worst things I've had to go through.
And I love that concept, Andrea, because that's not always something you can experience in the moment. But any of our listeners listening to this are of the age that you can look back at something and probably many things, that what it seemed like in the moment, there was something good that come from it also. What if everything is both and?
And in that, if that's the way that if that is what resonates for people, if you can think about that, how has that changed me? How has that shaped me? How am I different or better or stronger? Or then think about, it makes it pretty easy to forgive, doesn't it? Because what about everything that I've gained from the situation? It's not okaying it. It's not okaying it. But if we sit in a place of that hurt, I can't believe you did that, why don't you love me, or like all of that, if we sit in that energy, it makes forgiveness really challenging.
Yeah. So it might not make it easier, but the more you do it, the more you look back and see those situations, the more you can go, okay, this is going to be okay too. And I think that's one of the things that happens with age.
The wisdom comes, you think? Maybe it does.
That's my situation with the age, that experience, and be like, that has happened so many times in my life that I'm able to go like, yeah, this stinks right now and it doesn't feel good, but it's okay. And someday I'll be able to look back at this situation and go, oh, I see what came out of that. So I love the both and.
Yeah.
I'm always talking about the both.
And I think the age thing is that we do then live through more and more experiences, and we begin to recognize, I think, what can I control here and what can't.
Yeah. That doesn't mean you have to be old. You can get the lessons young too.
Yeah.
But, you know, just stand up.
It's kind of like they does come different perspectives. For me anyway, I have different perspectives because of the experiences. And the more years we have, well, maybe not, but anyway, the more experiences.
So I remember my father-in-law, when my husband passed, he's like 30 years older than me, my father-in-law. And he seemed like such a wise man, but he was so kind to me. And everything he ever said, he was so kind to me. And as I have aged, I'm like, oh, he must have wondered, oh, she just doesn't know what she doesn't know yet. And because as I get older, yeah, now I look at younger people sometimes in some of the situations and the way they react, I'm like, they just don't know what they don't know yet. And so it's really,
and that's okay, isn't it? Like, that's totally okay. Because I've interacted with people that are much older than me where I'm like, oh, they don't know what they don't know. Like and this is the thing, what happens, I go back to that same thing, what happens if our life is already planned out? And what happens if, Barb Gibson's journey has always been that these are the experiences she would have because this is the path she needs to ultimately get onto. What happens if Andrea Gullick is, what happens if we can kind of release the pressure, and the pressure and the belief that we control it. We have choices and we can maneuver and we can reflect and we can, change. But ultimately, what happens if the bigger picture is these are just experiences you are here to encounter?
Yeah. And that peace that you can have, I believe you can have that all the time, no matter what your circumstance looks like. And so the choice is, will you ask yourself enough what if questions? Will you go in and discover, why am I hanging on to this? So what is it saying to me that they treated me like this? And what is my justification in that? What is it really saying? And can you go in, learn that stuff about yourself and go like, oh, okay, and come back to peace. That's what our whole show is about, is experiencing peace and joy.
And what takes us away from that?
What takes
us away? Lack of trust or non-forgiveness, or are we enough? Like, this is ultimately every week what we want to really support people in doing, what we want to create a safe experience for, is this internal knowing that we are enough and that we matter.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it is available to everyone.
Yeah. So in finishing up, Barb, I think the three things for me, I'm going to go with three things that I really want to just clarify, and maybe you'll have your own three things. For me, forgiveness is the gift we give ourselves.
Yeah.
Forgiving is not open access. It's, you are still conscious about how the relationships and how the situations work for you. So there's a difference between forgiving and then that means that it's a free-for-all and you have to just revert back to however the situation was. I'm not sure if I'm clear on that, but and that when we say forgetting, not forgetting, so you can forgive but not forget. Forgiveness is releasing the energy of how much turmoil we create internally, and we don't forget what's happened. We just remember how we want to feel.
Mm-hmm. Love it. Yeah.
Is there any other like really defined things about forgiveness that you would love to just?
When you say three things, I'm thinking like forgiveness is not forgetting. Always look at yourself and see if you're forgiving yourself, and then look at how is it serving you to not forgive? How is it serving you to keep these feelings inside you? Is that the result you want? And if you don't, you do have a choice to change it.
Beautiful. Awesome. Another fabulous call. Thank you for everybody that tunes in live and also on the replay. And if you have any of your own ponderings, anything that come up when you listen back or watch, we'd love to hear your experience. This is obviously our experience, our perspective, but this is really about you and how this shows up for you. So we'd love to hear about it, and we'll catch you all again next week.
Great. Thanks for joining us.
Awesome. Thanks.